This is just a very interesting, dizzyingly interesting and exciting thing to engage kids about, and you want to ask, and adults about, and everyone about, and all of us, is it appropriate for 27-year-old kids in flip-flops to be adjudicating free speech for the entire world? What do you make about the difficulty of trying to apply the laws of 142 countries in which Google does business by American lawyers? What do you make of the fact that it's 3 in the morning and the Turkish government is demanding the removal of Facebook videos that criticize the King of Thailand for having his feet above his head, which is illegal in Thailand? And these deciders don't speak Thai, and the Greek government is objecting to something else. And is this too much responsibility for one country to have? You can tell how excited I think these issues are. I think it's really important. I think all of us have an obligation to be facilitators of this great constitutional conversation, because the meaning of privacy and free speech now is shaped not just by the Supreme Court, but by Google lawyers, by citizens, by students, ultimately by all of us, online and in classrooms and settings across the country. Brandeis said that self-education and public deliberation was a political duty of citizenship. I want to inspire kids to educate themselves, and I want your help about how to do it. So let's have a conversation about how to make that happen.
You can do all types of things with these little phones. The same thing that you can do with these computers. You can store information, you can store documents, you can store photos, you can store recordings, you can receive a telephone call in the middle of your presentation. Thank you to my best friend, Alan. Right? But I could even take this phone and press a button and make it set an alarm for me without even touching it. Right? Talk to my friend Siri, who exists inside the phone, and I have no idea who Siri is. Nonetheless, one has to think about how these telephones and how computers and how other technological devices have been impacted by what our expectations of privacy are. Now, I could stop right now and say, everyone, please take out your telephone, unlock it, and give it to me, and let me rummage through it. Some of you would be terrified, right, by what I might find. Some of you might not care. The point of that sort of exercise would be to show you that there is this thing called an expectation of privacy, and it really does reside in your technological devices. So the way that the law evolves is through a process called stare decisis, which really means let the decision stand. And the cases before it will dictate how the cases afterwards will be decided. And so what has sort of been the evolution of law in the context of our privacy rights? Or better yet, better stated, what has been the evolution of technological changes as it pertains to Fourth Amendment privacy concerns?
Technology is moving faster than policy and the law can keep pace with. So there are some very, very important questions that need to be answered and that in many cases are still unanswered. And I'll use body-worn cameras to start this off. There are questions about policies that departments need to have in place around when is it appropriate for an officer to record. Now, I'm going to set aside all those different wiretap laws around the country because they all vary as to what you can do, what you can't do, all that sort of thing. But let's presume that if you're wearing them, there's things that have already been worked out that you have the ability to be able to both video and audio record during the course of your duties. But when is it appropriate for an officer to turn the camera on? When it is appropriate and under what circumstances should an officer turn it off? How long should that footage be maintained in our custody? These are all very important issues that we need to be able to address.
The problem, of course, in most places, as even the head of the FBI has said recently on this whole debate about police use of force and deadly force, is that for the most part we have no data or very poor data about when force is used, when people are stopped, when people are frisked. We have pretty good data when they're finally arrested and brought to court. We have that data, but we have a whole sub-level of policing that's never really been exposed and analyzed in a significant way. So, for example, it came as a huge surprise to people in New York, for example, that the police were stopping 700,000 people a year. It came somewhat of a surprise to us in Philadelphia when we looked at this 4 years ago, and found that actually in Philadelphia, more people were being stopped per population than even New York. In 2009, there were 260,000 people stopped in Philadelphia in stop and frisk. And then when we started to look at that data, and the police department here, to its credit, had created an electronic database which had all that data, as opposed to most places in this country. If you go to most cities or localities and ask the government there to disclose how many people have been stopped and frisked in the past year, in 90% of the jurisdictions in this country, they'll say we don't keep that information.
This year, the participants were given just one word, and that word was policed. The young people were asked to reflect on that idea and explore what that word means and how it has affected young people in the city. Individually, they were then allowed to riff, that is, sort of really think about police in many different kind of contexts, and in a way that made sense to them and also to their cohort. This year, and so some of the projects include policing on how young folks dress, how diets are determined by access to food, the psychology of a beat police officer. But anyway, fundamental to the process are these two ideas, that one, everyone has an opinion, and it's very important that young people understand that everyone has an opinion, and that two, all opinions matter.
How much time do these students spend collecting the information and putting together the video? Is your program linked with a school, a classroom, or is this after school weekends? How much time do they spend?
It's not linked to any one school, and that actually gets into a whole issue about the current situation in Philadelphia and a lot of other cities in terms of how one integrates cultural organizations and community organizations to what's going on in the classroom. What we do is we send out we recruit, and we found that really teachers are our best allies. So we work with teachers at many schools. Philadelphia has a magnet school system. And so we actually, in some ways, avoid the magnet schools because those schools tend to be the schools that already have lots of great things. But we always get good applications from the magnet schools, but we tend to work in the neighborhood schools. Those are the schools that oftentimes become the schools of last resort. And so we recruit in those schools. I shouldn't say last resort, but yeah, I think they're, in terms of resources, they have less resources, it seems to me, than the magnet school.
Somebody better get our kids on the stick. Somebody better turn out citizens who understand their responsibilities and their rights. I mean, we have an unprecedented level of rights. No country in the history of this planet affords its citizens greater freedom and greater rights than we do. But I strongly believe that with that great gift of basically unfettered rights comes a deep responsibility to participate as citizens. We're not going to mandate voting like Australia does, but we need to just let our kids at the earliest age know how important it is. So I want to commend you for what you all do and the interest you've shown. If you deal with 4th and 5th and 6th graders and deal with them and give them adult concepts to think about, it's amazing how mature and responsible and thoughtful their results are.